What's going on, everybody? Khalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you my full review of the OnePlus Nord N300 5G to help you decide whether or not it's the right phone for you. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting a 6.56-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 269, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So overall, the display is decent, but for what it is, I feel like it does leave a bit to be desired. On one hand, at 6.56 inches, it is decently large, so if you're going to be consuming a lot of content and just going to be on your phone a decent amount in general, doing your daily activities will be at least decently comfortable. Things will be decently large and pretty easy to see. And with the 20.5:9 aspect ratio, we are getting a pretty tall and narrow form factor, so when you're in landscape mode doing stuff like watching videos, for example, or looking at photos like this, you will get a nice immersive experience. Things in general are going to look pretty cinematic, so definitely good here. And if you're doing something like browsing the web, using social media, really anything that involves scrolling, with this kind of form factor, you'll be able to fit a decent amount of content on the screen without having to scroll too much. And with a 90Hz refresh rate as opposed to the standard 60Hz, the movement on the screen is going to be a little bit faster and smoother, making the phone in general feel more premium to use. But despite all this, despite the display being pretty decent in almost every way, the one thing that really prevents me from saying this is actually a super good display is the 720p resolution. I know there are plenty of entry-level 5G phones, in fact, especially with Metro and T-Mobile. In this price range, I want to say at least half of them for that matter, they all have 720p resolutions. I mean, it is pretty common, but that being said, up close, you really can tell this is only a 720p display. So if you are going to be consuming a lot of content, sure, on stuff like YouTube, it's not really that big a deal because I don't know about you guys, but for me, I always have the image quality on auto anyway. So when I watch YouTube videos, it always ends up being in like 480p or something ridiculous like that. And I always forget to change it until halfway through the video anyway. So in that regard, it's probably not that big a deal. But at the same time, if you're really going to be consuming a lot of content, watching lots of videos, maybe using Netflix or HBO or something like that, you are probably going to want 1080p for that. And again, unfortunately, this phone doesn't have it, which is kind of disappointing. And keep in mind, there are phones like the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, for example, that just came out a couple months ago. That phone does actually have a 1080p display. And not only that, but I think it's actually a little bit cheaper than this phone. So that really goes to show that on one hand, if you're more of a casual user and you're not really that concerned about image quality, and having just a decently large display is good enough for you, then in that case, this is going to be perfectly fine. But if you really want the best display you can get for the money, then unfortunately, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is not going to be it. Now for storage, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so definitely not bad here. In fact, in this price range for an entry-level 5G phone, I want to say almost every phone like this has the same amount of storage. The TCL Stylus 5G actually has 128, but that phone is a bit more expensive anyway. So the point is, if you're looking for a 5G phone around the $200 price range, you're almost always going to be getting 64GB of internal storage, and in my opinion, this amount of storage, while not being amazing, is definitely not going to be bad for the average user. Now, of course, if you're someone who's constantly downloading a bunch of apps, games, stuff like that, then in that kind of situation, it will fill up pretty quickly. But again, for the average user, if you have a modest amount of apps and you make sure to offload whatever you can to a microSD card, then in that case, 64GB is at least acceptable. For security features, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G does have Face Unlock and a fingerprint scanner right here in the power key. So definitely nice to get both options here. Not really uncommon, but still always nice to have choices, right? But real quick, let's give the fingerprint scanner a try. There we go. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see, the fingerprint scanner is real fast and responsive. No issues at all. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, up front, we got a typical water drop notch for the front-facing camera. This camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a dual camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So while I like the camera module, definitely looks pretty cool, unfortunately, feature-wise, it really doesn't have a whole lot. And this is honestly especially disappointing because even really low-end phones that are not even 5G phones have like at least a macro camera, if not an ultra-wide camera too. But unfortunately with this phone, if you were expecting any real extra features, then you are going to be disappointed here. And because of this, I really can't say this is going to be the best camera for the money. That being said though, despite really not having very many features, I do think the photo quality on this phone is actually really good and sort of makes up for this. So if you are taking regular photos for like Instagram, for example, and you don't really care about having an ultra-wide camera or a macro camera, but maybe you're using like portrait mode or something like that, the camera here will definitely get the job done. To give you an idea of what it can do, here's some pictures taken with the main camera of the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. And again, I definitely think for what it is, the photo quality here is really good. So sure, it doesn't have any real features or anything, but at least it does take really good regular photos. And I feel like at the end of the day, even though an ultra-wide camera and a macro camera are pretty cool features, most people are probably not going to be constantly using them. I mean, I personally rarely use the ultra-wide camera on my iPhone 13. And personally, I mean, obviously everyone's going to be using their camera differently, but I've never once been in a situation where I really wished I had a macro camera. So the point is, even though this phone unfortunately doesn't have a bunch of extra features, I feel like for what it is, the main part of the camera is actually really good. So on one hand, if you really do want an ultra-wide camera or a macro camera or both in this price range, you can easily find some better options. But if you're just taking regular photos, then keep in mind, while this phone doesn't specifically have better camera quality than, say, the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G or the TCL Stylus 5G, I do think the photo quality is going to be at least good enough for most people, and this really just goes to show that if you want to take good photos, you don't need to spend $1,000 on a super high-end device. You can get something like this for like $230, and in most situations, it will get the job done just fine. And then for video, we are getting a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K or even 2K, which I'm not really that surprised by because even at this point in 2023, entry-level phones typically can't record 4K videos. So if you are coming from maybe an older flagship phone, for example, and you're expecting every phone at this point to be able to record in 4K, then just keep in mind, unfortunately, that's not how it works. And for that ability, you will need to spend a bit more and get something higher end. Now, the video quality for this phone is decent at least. I'll play a clip real quick to give you an idea of what it looks like, but essentially make of this what you will. I personally feel like for YouTube videos or serious content creation, if this is really the only thing you can get, it would probably at least be acceptable. But if you really want the best option you can get for your money, I feel like you could spend a bit more and get something quite a bit better. Like for example, I would personally over this use something like the Samsung Galaxy A33 5G, which can record 4K videos and much better 1080p videos for that matter. So in general, if you're recording a lot of videos, then yeah, you might be disappointed with the quality here, but overall for more casual use, I do think it will get the job done. When it comes to the RAM and processor, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 810 processor. Overall, I do think the performance on this phone is pretty good. It's not really anything special. I mean, compared to most phones in this price range like the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, TCL Stylus 5G, Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G, okay, that one's a little bit higher end than the others. But in general, it's not really significantly faster or slower than any of the other phones like it. But that being said, for average daily use, stuff like web browsing, social media, playing games from time to time, and watching YouTube videos and stuff like that, for that kind of use, it will definitely get the job done. And I feel like most people will get a pretty good experience here. I did run a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 5, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone, and then comparing your results to these. And that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not this phone's going to be a performance upgrade for you. But in general, again, for the average user, for what it is, the performance on this phone is plenty good enough. So if you are looking for an affordable 5G phone that has good performance, you're really not going to go wrong here. For the battery, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, this phone has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 33 watt fast charging, so definitely a great battery here in pretty much every way. First of all, with a 5000 mAh battery, in the US, that's pretty much the largest battery you can get, so of course, you can definitely expect some great battery life and longevity here. In addition to this, with 33 watt fast charging, the charging speed on this phone is really good, and not only does it have this kind of fast charging, but keep in mind of course, to fully utilize any phone's fast charging, you will need a really good fast charger, which typically you're gonna have to buy yourself. But with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, as you can see here, it actually does come with a 33 watt fast charger, which is really not something you see every day. I mean, if you get something like a Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra or an iPhone 14 or whatever, you're lucky to even get a charging cable, let alone something like this that I feel like this is gonna cost at least like $20 or $30 by itself. So if you do care about fast charging, this is definitely a great value. And again, with a 5000 mAh battery, you are gonna get great battery life. And then down the road, as the battery degrades, like any battery does, a really large battery is gonna last for quite a bit longer. So if you like to get one phone and keep it for a while without having to replace it, then in that case, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is gonna be a great choice. Now for the software, this phone does currently have Android 12 with the December 5th security update. So unfortunately, no Android 13, although I feel like at some point, this phone will eventually get it. At this point, this far into the year, in March of 2023, not very many budget phones actually have Android 13, aside from Samsung's. So honestly, I'm not really that surprised that this phone does have Android 12. It would have been awesome to see Android 13, but I guess we will eventually. So if you really do care that much about the software, then I would definitely recommend considering a Samsung instead. But if you're not really that concerned, then just keep in mind, although this phone does currently have Android 12, I would be really surprised if it doesn't get Android 13 soon. Another thing to keep in mind here is that with the OnePlus OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we are getting NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, you'll be happy to know you can do that with this phone. In addition to this, another really cool feature this phone has that I am definitely glad to see is stereo audio. Now, in case you don't know what that means, when a phone has stereo audio, if you're doing something like watching a video or playing music, sound comes out of both the main speaker and the earpiece, giving you a much nicer, more immersive experience. Now, obviously, if you're using headphones all the time anyway, you probably won't even notice, but having stereo audio gives you a bit more flexibility when you're consuming content, and again, I feel like it sounds a lot better. And for whatever reason, there are even phones that are a bit more expensive than this that don't have stereo audio, so yeah, I'm definitely glad this phone does. But real quick, I do want to give you an idea of what it's actually like to consume content on this phone, so take a look at this clip. You're most likely not going to have any issues. Now for security features, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE does have Face Unlock, and it also has a fingerprint scanner right here in the display, so definitely real nice and premium looking, as I would expect from a phone in this price range. But let's go ahead and so as you can see, when I cover the main speaker, you can still hear things decently well. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And I do want to point out, it is nice to see this phone has both a fingerprint scanner and Face Unlock, because while compared to the average mid-range phone, this is really nothing new at all. For an entry-level flagship phone, comparing this phone to something like the iPhone SE or the Google Pixel 6a, this is actually the only one of the three that has both a fingerprint scanner and Face Unlock. For whatever reason, the others don't. So if that is something that matters to you, definitely keep this in mind. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, we got a nice looking hole punch front-facing camera. This camera is So overall, definitely good. Really the only complaint I have is, again, having a 720p resolution definitely makes the image quality significantly less good. But honestly, for casual YouTube videos and stuff like that, it's probably not that big a deal. It's really just when you get into like streaming stuff on Netflix, HBO Max, things like that. In that case, I could see where it would be a little disappointing to not have 1080p. But otherwise, for more casual stuff like YouTube and social media, you should be at least okay. And again, for what it is, the audio quality is good too. Taking a look at the overall design, like most OnePlus phones, I do think this phone looks real nice. Despite being made pretty much entirely of plastic, the materials do feel a bit more premium than you might expect from a phone like this, which again, considering this is a OnePlus phone, is not really that surprising. And it also has a good amount of weight to it too. When it comes to the design, the only real complaint I have is the water drop notch here. OnePlus phones usually have hole punch cameras, and I feel like that looks so much better. So I don't know why they went back to this, but again, otherwise, everything else looks real good. But in conclusion, my general thoughts about the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. Overall, is this the best 5G phone you can get for the money? Personally, unless you're getting it for free, I don't really think so because, again, the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G is a bit cheaper than this, and although it does have its quirks too, and it's kind of debatable which one is actually better, I feel like it does have some significant advantages over this phone. Same with stuff like the TCL Stylus 5G and even the T-Mobile Revel 6 Pro 5G. All those phones do have some advantages over the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. So while on one hand, if you are looking for an entry-level 5G phone, for more basic activities, you want a decent amount of storage, good performance, a really nice camera albeit without a bunch of features, and a really good battery, and then features like NFC and 5G connectivity in general. In that case, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is going to be a really good choice. But that being said, if you really want to maximize the features and overall value that you get for the money, then in general, I do think there are better options out there. But this concludes my review for the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about it, definitely check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about the phone, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.